Okay, hello everyone. My name is Lance Bailey, and I'm the creator of HealthySimAdmin, as well as the consultant for our free weekly webinar consulting today and Q&A session. If you wouldn't mind, please in the chat room below the live streaming window, enter in who you are, what your title is, and what institution you're coming from, so that folks can get a better idea about the types of administrators that are, or technicians or clinical educators that are joining us from around the world today. And that way we can all see where everyone's coming from. And while we're doing that, I'm going to go ahead and get started here. I'm going to talk a little bit about myself and just introduce myself a little bit so that folks have an opportunity to learn a little bit more about who I am. So like I said, my name is Lance Bailey. I run HealthySimulation.com, which is a free resource website for the international medical simulation community. My experience previously, before starting HealthySimulation.com in 2010, I was a simulation technician for the LA Community College District. And the reason that we're all here today, though, is because 2009 was one of the most difficult years of my life, and that was the year that we began the Clinical Simulation Center of Las Vegas. And I was hired out from Los Angeles and moved to Las Vegas to help the University of Nevada, Las Vegas School of Nursing Program, Nevada State College School of Nursing Program, as well as the University of Nevada School of Medicine, all come together into a new center called the Clinical Simulation Center of Las Vegas, which is a 31,000 square foot facility located in next to the UMC Hospital in downtown Las Vegas. Now, I'm betting that my story is very similar to your story in a lot of different ways, because we had a new program with 3 different institutions and 2 different disciplines, and at the same time we had 5 new staff coming on board whose responsibilities were being taken over from a previous skills lab coordinator, as well as everyone was new to these positions, and no one had ever run either medical simulation except for myself or clinical skills labs before that time. And so my position as a new manager was also new to me. We were entering into a new space. Not only was the AC on the fritz, and we had 106-degree heat out in Las Vegas when we opened in May of or that summer of 2009. We also didn't have the desktops in place yet. They were on back order from Dell, so that took an entire semester to get hooked up. We didn't have any policies or procedures in place to be able to take care of any of the numerous needs that we're going to need to develop over the future. We had unknown supply needs with over 500 learners about to occupy the space. We had dozens of pieces of equipment to learn, as well as $1 million more worth of equipment to select and get through the purchasing department's red tape, which was very difficult because we were a new department on a campus, and so we had no contacts with folks like parking, the police, facilities, or IT. And so we were very siloed as a new department without many resources available to us at that time. Now, the reason why I made this story, though, this difficult story, my story, is because I truly love simulation. And I have a sincere appreciation for this technology and the true understanding of what it can do in terms of how it can help us, because I gained a firsthand experience of this, of the power of simulation while putting out real fires during my fire academy. And I'm sure all of you have also experienced the power of simulation. When you hear the gasps from tour groups as they see the birthing mannequin in action, when you see a new educator understanding the simulation for the first time, and when you feel the goosebumps from watching a student make a life-threatening mistake in the safety of a simulated scenario. I know that sometimes it feels like no amount of love that we have, though, is going to get an educator with technophobia to start using your program's simulation equipment. And so here we are with all of these mannequins and simply told by those in charge to just make it work. And we better learn how to use it, because in this day and age, equipment over 5 years old is archaic and already backwards. So how do we afford to keep up with this rapid pace of technology? Not to mention that there's no one else in our institutions to ask for advice. Well, I'm proud to say, though, that I overcame these difficulties, and so can you. The strategy was to ride the wave by pulling together the power of the staff, the labs, the equipment, and then staying in front of it all by keeping that motion of movement forward. Now, just like I learned for the first time when I was, after visiting SimTiki in Oahu, I got the chance to learn how to ride my first wave, and the power of the motion of the wave itself, once I learned to move in front of it, the rest was simply just standing up and enjoying one of the best rides of my life. And I think that that's something that is applicable as well to getting in front of all of this information and operations of a simulation program and then being able to move it forward. But what are the resources that were available to me while I was a Simulation Center program director, and to ourselves as this growing professional community to specifically support administrators? Well, you know, there is a few big educator-based simulation meetings, but unfortunately the content always ends at when the event's doors close. There's very limited means right now to communicate with one another, and hardly any place that we can share resources or knowledge in an organized, but more importantly, ongoing fashion. Most difficult of all is that we have have to be physically present to gain any of the substantial knowledge available from these meetings. And while I've been able to make a few contacts at these meetings and online, the dedicated support has just never existed for administrators, even though the community itself has been growing stronger and stronger. And this community, to me, though, is our best resource. With a dedicated space, a conversation can begin to take place where all of us can share and learn the best of the best techniques together. The reality is that collectively we all hold the answers to today's administrative challenges. Our unique backgrounds, because none of us went to school to become medical simulation program administrators, the unique backgrounds that we all bring makes us experts in the particular aspects of running medical simulation. This is also true for simulation technicians or even clinical educators with previous experience in other areas, and as well as other departments. We can all come together and share this information in such a way that we all gain the best of the best. And I feel that you no longer need to be siloed in your simulation program, that there is a community out there, and especially one for administrators, that just has not been supported to the fullest extent possible. So HealthySimAdmin, take a look at the website while we engage in this live streaming webinar and answer your questions about medical simulation related topics, because the goal is to create an improved networking opportunity to bring us together and allow us to share the best successes and discuss ideas, as well as gain vital resources to cut down on the time developing, testing, and experimenting with policies and operations that may or may not work. No one person can have all the answers, and mistakes are going to be made, but the more that we share, the less everyone will have to stumble. So HealthySimAdmin is not going to just be a community, but a sharing-based community, one that understands that the more we share our knowledge, the more it can be improved upon, and the more successful we can all become, which I hope that we can demonstrate through this webinar. So that being said, let's bring up the chat room window and start answering questions. And I need to bring up HealthySimAdmin.com. So this is, again, a live streaming event, and I'm currently located in San Francisco. If you've had a chance to read the topics of items that we can definitely cover, please visit HealthySimulation.com, which is the first post up right there. It'll tell you about the different types of topics that we can cover, but anything from simulation technician specific operations, how to get clinical educators more involved with simulation, to a business development or collaborative program needs, IT infrastructure, anything really to do with the how-to of medical simulation, which is really what HealthySimAdmin is really focused all about. What role do you currently have in the day-to-day operations of simulation? Well, right now I am a freelance consultant to be able to help simulation programs in terms of their day-to-day operations, because I've had 3 years of experience as the director of the Clinical Simulation Center of Las Vegas, as well as a technician for the LA-based community colleges for a year and a half before that. And so I create resources such as HealthySimulation.com. I've been the executive director and the founder of the Gathering for Healthcare Simulation Technology Specialists, which this past August provided over 156 simulation technicians from around the world with 3 days of hands-on training. You can learn more about that at simghosts.org, and I'll go ahead and write that down for you here. As well as obviously designing HealthySimAdmin. Okay, next question from Marie. Can you give us any advice on how to set up formal simulation programs to share resources among different clinical and academic organizations? Well, Marie, I think that's partly what we're trying to accomplish here with HealthySimAdmin. It's worked very well with simghost.org. That's a new nonprofit organization which has an online database for file sharing. With regards to forms and documentation that are specific to the operations of a simulation lab, anything from examples and templates of patient charts to the use of policies and procedures for operations of the space. And so one of the goals of HealthySimAdmin is to be able to gather those resources and provide them in such a way as that they are available to anyone who visits the website or becomes a subscriber to the website. There are several resources that are currently available to the community, and a lot of those are listed through HealthySimulation.com in terms of places to get free simulation scenarios or other key documents that might be helpful. If you just search for the document of interest, you should be able to find it through the website itself. If you yourself are looking for more places to do these types of things, I think regionally or with your catalog of administrators that or other simulation champions that you're communicating with, reach out to them and start a Google group to be able to, especially if they're in your own region, to organize small collective meetings where folks can tour around to other simulation programs, each one maybe hosting one during a different month, where folks can come together and share those experiences and maybe also bring those resources on a thumb drive, which then can be emailed to everybody. I've seen that in several different states around the United States where, you know, even just a collective of anywhere from 5 to 10 folks will regionally come together to a different simulation program each month and learn about what is going on at that simulation program. And it also helps to build the community and also share those types of resources. So I'd highly recommend that if that's something that you're interested in starting for your own collective area. If you have a longer question that's a little more difficult to answer via chat room, please feel free to call my telephone number, which I'll give you right here, right now, and I will relay your question back to the audience that's watching. Okay, Marie's now asking, I'm interested in how to get learners from different organizations access to simulation. Well, Marie, the first thing that I would suggest to do is go to the lead administration for those different organizations and let them know about the opportunities that you want to co-create. You know, getting those folks all into the same room at the same time is very might be the trickiest part about it all to begin with. You know, use a Doodle or Doodle.com or other resource for scheduling, and try to get all those folks either on the phone or in the same room at the same time, and demonstrate to them that there's an opportunity for their organizations to come together and collaborate on and share learning opportunities, not only maybe together but individually for themselves. You can use examples from other simulation programs, like for example at the Clinical Simulation Center of Las Vegas, we were able to bring UNLV's 4th semester nursing students together with the School of Medicine's internal medicine residents to provide mock code simulations. And so now we had about 5 or 6 nursing students in the room with 1 or 2 residents, and really created some very dynamic simulation scenarios that were just grown out of our faculty coming together to be able to provide those levels of simulations for all the learners. And then individually what they did was they came back and debriefed together, and then separated and then debriefed separately with their individual instructors. So I think it's really about demonstrating the power and the potential, using examples of other simulation programs. And open houses are a really great way. Get one or two of your simulation champions to come to the room and for a particular open house, bring some learners who are going to be volunteering their time, and allow them to demonstrate a collaborative simulation opportunity, so that other educators who maybe have not had yet the potential to see the real power of simulation can watch from the debrief room and see how the learning opportunities can just naturally unfold, whether that be for pediatrics or whether it be for an OB related scenario, or even in the ED. The important part to note is it's not so much about that specific content, but the demonstration of the process itself, of the learning that's possible. And so I think that the more that you can show folks simulation, the easier it will become to get them and their learners to come together. Because you could talk about simulation and the benefits of simulation until you're blue in the face, but it's not until you actually show someone the power and the potential of something where they get this aha moment because they can see it and they can feel those goosebumps of it working, that they will click in. And I've seen educators who for years and years were not interested in simulation, and then all of a sudden one day they came in and saw another group educating in the same department that they were in, but from another institution with simulation, and it was like a light bulb went on. They became a simulation champion the next day. They started going to conferences. They wanted resources. They started developing scenarios. So I think that it's just a matter of continuing to demonstrate and show this process as much as possible. And I think that video production is a great way to be able to do that as well. If you have a lot of geographic area to cover, where maybe you don't have those clinical educators from those different departments all in the same space at the same time, if you can video record some of your simulations and your simulation debriefing experiences, because I think that's a really important aspect of the learning process, either through your on-campus production team, if you have students if you're at a school, or your hospital has an on-site production team, record a simulation experience and put it on YouTube. It's free to upload up to, I think even now, an hour worth of content, and upload it. Make sure you get permission, of course, from all of the learners and faculty involved, and use that as you could send that out, and then one simulation experience can be shared with hundreds of faculty or clinical educators all at the same time, so they can really kind of start to get the understanding. And of course, if you can, put a little intro in there, talk about what it is that you're trying to demonstrate, talk about the potential of the program, and even if just for an internal program, you can then take that and use that for an external contract or partners that might be interested in developing programs with you that can eventually make money for your program. So I hope that answers that question. Okay, Matthew, Marie is interested in the same thing. Please email him. Heather. Hi, I'm Heather, and I am with the Center for Simulation and Research at Cincinnati Children's, and I am a coordinator. Hi, Heather. Nice to meet you digitally. Do you have a question for us regarding administration, simulation technology specialist, SimTech work, how to get certain systems? You name it, we'll answer it. Okay. Marie, we have interest in the area with various organizations purchasing mannequins. I'm interested in getting everyone together before we all start working in silos. And I think that sooner is better than later, Marie, because if you can get everyone to just come together for a virtual meeting and bring their equipment lists or the things that they're thinking about buying, and seeing how much space and equipment is available and who's interested in doing what, how can these resources start to get shared? Now be careful, don't let yourself get sidetracked into providing external users free training at your program. Once is more than enough to demonstrate the power of simulation, in my belief. But if you get locked into, you have this clinical partner, they'd love to use the space, but there's no financial return or no ability for your learners to also engage with those learners in a collaborative simulation learning environment, down the road that's going to lead to trouble, because then they're going to potentially want to increase usage. Who's going to pay for the staff time, the supplies, and the equipment? You know, plenty of folks have emailed me and said, hey, we're providing education for 3 or 4 different groups in our simulation lab. How do we make this work? But yet they don't have a budget where funds are coming in from those different programs to be able to support not only the current process, but the expanded process that everybody's interested in doing. So make sure that you start to identify these stakeholders. You can bring them all together and quickly start to figure out, what the potential partnership opportunities are. But, instead of everyone investing in every single piece of, and this is the best way to go about it, I feel, instead, letting folks know, instead of, hey, you buying absolutely everything, investing in staff, investing in all the equipment, investing in all the AV systems, mannequins, all the training platforms, all the supplies, all the space, all the facility usage, why don't we all come together first, see what everyone's got right now, and then talk about where we can move forward from this. And start with the folks that are probably in charge of those programs, those simulation champions that would really like to see collaborative education occur, and then have those administrators that are kind of higher level reach out to get an MOU from the presidents or the CEOs of your hospital or medical center, slightly higher organizational, so that the organizations as themselves can kind of come together and understand that there's a partnership opportunity here that really kind of explains the what the agreement would be in terms of if there was any need for additional funding support or funding needs long-term down the road. Okay, glad we could answer that question for you. So, one of the while we wait for another question, feel free again to, if you have a question that's a little bit too long to type out, feel free to just call me right here at that telephone number. We'll relay that question back to the audience. But one of the important things to notice is that I am just one simulation program administrator, and HealthySimAdmin is going to have a panel of 10 readily available through the 2-day event that are all going to be able to provide perspectives. Now, those folks are coming from military simulation programs, nursing community college ADN programs, through university level BSN programs, hospitals, medical centers, EMS, and rescue, to be able, as well as hospitals, to be able to kind of really give a dynamic perspective, not only about massive 31,000 square foot facility, but also a single lab with one mannequin, which is where I originally came from, which was a single lab about the size of this conference room, and then expanded that out and working to a medical simulation center of 31,000 square feet with 5 simulation labs alone, not to mention a standardized patient hall and 2 clinical skills labs, a ward, 4 classrooms, a lecture hall. But I feel that it's important to note that even some systems and tools for a small one-bed simulation lab can have a dramatic effect for a large simulation center, and vice versa. One of the do-it-yourself video contest entries for the Gathering of Healthcare Simulation Technology Specialists, which took place in August, was a slap wrist ID band for the patient. So I don't know if you've ever, if your kids have, I used to play with these as a kid, you'd take this long, slender, about an inch long, foot long kind of band, metal band, and you could slap it, and as it came onto your wrist, it would circle your wrist and stay on. And so they would simply just put the ID tag and ID band of the patient on there, and it was so much easier than trying to either tape that ID band onto the simulation mannequin or button it up and provide a background again. So little concepts like that, I think, from a small simulation program to how do you bring in business for your lab, I think are valid across the board. And Kim Bailey is going to be coming and talking to us about her community college, which was able to secure external funding for their program, which helped to pay for the ongoing cost of supplies as well as their part-time simulation technician. While she was able to do that with just a single two mannequin lab, I was able to do that with a 31,000 square foot complete medical educational training facility. And so the ability to no matter what size you are, the opportunity to bring in external contracts and utilize some of that staff and that space that you have and that equipment that's sitting there now is always a benefit. So, for example, I was talking about in my introduction about riding that wave. Well, if you're having problems with your internal program where you're not able to get it kickstarted and moving forward, then design something where you can have the opportunity to test out an external program for another user who does get simulation and wants to use it but just doesn't have the access to the resources for the massive investment that you guys have already started with your labs. Nothing is going to make your supervisor happier than if you come into that space and say, hey, look, so-and-so hospital down the road wants to come in and use our simulation center for a day, and they want to pay us $3,000 to be able to do that, or whatever the magic number is. And all of a sudden, the eyes will perk up, the ears will start listening. Oh, really? We can bring in these external contracts to our space and start utilizing it? Yes. Those are things that can then be demonstrated back again to those internal users. Hey, look who's coming to use our space. They think it's so great that they're willing to pay money and shell out for something that you guys have access to free for. Want to consider more about utilization and how you can get involved with simulation? Come and check out our event, such and such date, or watch our video. It's about creating momentum within your program so that you can stay ahead of it, and finding those ways to ride that wave even if the wave has not been built up yet within your internal program. So there's numerous ways to be able to do that. Okay. So we're Weinberg or Marie or Heather, any other questions at this time with regards to any aspect of running simulation? Okay. Well, I'm going to go ahead and talk a little bit while we're all here about staff operations in terms of developing a staff for that first time, because that was really one of the trickiest parts about my simulation program when it began at the Clinical Simulation Center. So in 2009, we had 5 new staff, and none of which had any experience in the positions other than myself with regards to simulation, but I didn't have any management experience. I was a new manager, so everyone really had individually something to learn. Then as a team and as a group, we all had something to learn. And very quickly it became apparent. Now, our dean stated as our goal was to survive for the first semester. All we had to do was make sure that we didn't burn down the building and that we could make it through the first semester, and we could take a look and analyze how we had done and what we need to do move forward. Because our staff had literally 1 week before the semester started for 500 different learners to come into the space and put together the office, figure out what they were going to need to do, and start to design some policies or documents that would help them to be able to do that. And so since none of us had any experience before, and there wasn't an opportunity during that time for these new staff to go to any type of simulation meeting, there just wasn't the time. I think we had an opportunity to go to a moulage workshop, but not between the amount of time that we've been hired and needing to start. We quickly realized that we needed to have a weekly meeting. A weekly meeting where the trials and the experiments that we had created the week before and come together as a group and see how those had worked out. So that, as the staff were performing their positions and these roles and those responsibilities, they could come back and assess how those were doing. And so it was a very stressful time because folks had to, they had to know ahead of time what they were doing and also continue to move forward with actually performing the actions required. So it caused a lot of frustration for the staff, and one of the ways that we wanted to address that better was by creating, again, these weekly meetings where the team could all come together and reflect on what had happened last week, things that we needed to develop immediately for long-term strategy in terms of what we needed to do to move forward, and also what did and did not work that previous week. Now, initially bi-monthly, what we did was we had the staff each contribute about a paragraph worth of content and updates about what was going on in their individual department. So we had someone from IT representing the computer issues, what was happening there. We had somebody from simulation program talking about the educational opportunities that we were going to try to provide for our group as well. Someone from the clinical skills labs talking about the new forms and documentation and guidelines for access to the storage space and how they would be able to do that. Myself as an administrator talking about all of the needs, and then our administrative assistant also talking about the needs of the program in terms of what was going to be necessary for fixes or problems with AC, things that we were doing on a facilities level or scheduling level. And so as we came together, one of the first things that we did was we wanted to take the scheduling system out of the hands of the clinical educators from the 3 different programs that were joining together. And the reason that we wanted to do that was because we wanted to create an umbrella administration over the 3 individual schools that were utilizing the space. And the reason that we wanted to do that was because otherwise we felt that clinical educators would come in, see that something was maybe booked, but they really needed it anyway, and since the school maybe was or was not planning to use it from another school, that they would just go ahead and book it. So we wanted to kind of grasp that power and hold it back into one central individual who could be responsible for taking all of these needs. And it took several years. I will be honest with you, to be able to grab and really understand the process that would be necessary long term, and it's still something that's evolving in terms of how it would work best to be able to get educators to a semester and a half beforehand schedule the rooms exactly the way that they need it and provide them with the initial resources for how to get the equipment and supplies that they needed in that space. Because we were talking about, a faculty of about 200 different faculty if you included all the school of medicine educators, and definitely 100 from the 2 nursing programs that we had occupying the space. And so that was a lot of work, and so we created a free Google Calendar. We used a free Google Calendar, which I would recommend you check out if you're looking for a scheduling software for free. It's not the best scheduling software out there. There's probably one that might have better integration for all of your program, but we were really looking at a lot of dynamic spaces that weren't just simulation space, but also clinical skills lab space and standardized patient hall and classroom. So we needed a much broader system to be able to handle all of that work. And so what we did was we had one Google account that was a secured and private account for only the administration team, so myself and the administrative assistant, which inputted all of the information after all of the requests came in. And I'll go into a little bit more detail about how that scheduling process happened. And then there was a second Google account, which was a view account of the first account. So you can actually share your calendar with another account. And so what we did was we gave a public access account to all of the clinical educators and faculty from the 3 schools and administration that might need it, and provided them with the view of that calendar. So that way they could see, was my rooms booked? Did I get the appropriate skills list, which we could save, in terms of what skills we're going to be educated that day in the in those rooms themselves, because you can go in and add more details to the specific rooms. Am I on the schedule correctly? But then that way they can't edit it or change anything and mess up the calendar, because it's when you have 60 different rooms being booked throughout 1 week, you can see how it could get very confusing very quickly. And one minor change, well, is that change just for that week, or is that all the way across the board? And then how do you look about that for the entire semester? So it was a lot of work. And I recommend highly, I said last week in our last week's webinar that if you're starting a new program or you're trying to expand a program, having somebody even at a part-time to be able to handle the scheduling and the ongoing reception and integration, because that person who's the glue of the program itself is really important. That's really a key position to be able to create a successful program. So just going back and talking about, what were those scheduling designs? We had different groups come together and talk about what the actual needs were going to be, but I believe that it ended up in such a fashion that about a semester and a half ahead of time, we would require that everyone provide the skills labs, the classrooms, and the simulations that they requested. And those would be 2 separate forms, so skills labs and classrooms we considered as one form, but simulation required as another, because unless you were doing an OB or pediatric scenario, you weren't necessarily guaranteed one particular room over the other for the simulation, because we had 3 simulation lab rooms that were not specific to any type of genre, if you will. Unlike the LDR, the pediatrics room, which had stickers everywhere and was very colorful with the pediatric mannequins. Excuse me. And so what that did was it got all that information requested by a certain date. Now, if those clinical educators and that faculty did not provide that information by that certain date, well, now they go into a second tier of folks. And the first tier of folks, everyone's going to be able to all to come together. The administrative assistant is going to plug all that information into the Google Calendar, take a look. If there's any conflicts, it was never really our responsibility to get them solved per se. We would offer advice because we could see the bigger picture about ways to massage and move individual courses around a little bit or specific needs, but we would connect those two programs that were having the conflict, or three sometimes, and say, look, how are you planning on working this out or detailing them? Providing an opportunity to negotiate, okay, well, I'll move we'll move this course if that course can be moved over here from you, and it always worked out. Even though while it was a big headache to kind of look at all this information, at the end of the day, our conflicts were almost zero. Now, last minute, we did have issues of things of people who did not properly schedule themselves, book the rooms for too long, book the rooms for not long enough. And so we started creating kind of a consequences sheet where if you did not take that calendar system seriously up front, there would be difficulties ahead. And the reason that this all worked was because we had higher level administrative support. So those deans of those programs were in full support of that. If those educators could not figure out their schedule ahead of time and make appropriate requests in a way that actually became true, that there could be consequences. And so, if there were enough of those consequences, then you would move further and further and further down this line of not being able to schedule events first, or taking the bottom totem pole for any negotiation that's necessary, up into the point of, well, you're not allowed to schedule anything at all until you come in and have a meeting with your respective dean and the administration of the center, because it's just not working anymore. And once we put those consequences in place, we had a pretty big drop off in terms of the number of issues that we were facing with last minute schedule additions or other changes, because it gave us certain rules and guidelines that educators had to abide by if they wanted to use the space. We definitely shut down as much as possible anyone scheduling simulation within 2 weeks, because to not be able to provide your staff with the opportunity to do the work that they're doing already lined up for their schedule, plus handle the management and maintenance, the management of the maintenance of the equipment, the cleaning, the scenario development and design, all the other items that they have on their plate, a list of things to do, is unfair. Because if all of a sudden somebody shows up and says, hey, we want this, this, that, and the other thing, and they've already set aside that day to do some other process which would be necessary for tomorrow's success, well, now tomorrow's educator comes to find something that's not to the standard and of quality of service that we've promised them, because somebody else wanted to just jump the shark and kind of move forward. And so we really honed down on creating a scheduling system that required folks to follow these guidelines and these rules and apply and act, for access to these equipment into the space in an orderly fashion. And I feel like that's fair because, while these three schools had kind of educators that were responsible for their clinical labs and some simulation in their programs before they all came together, yes, now they had to take a ticket and get in line like everybody else, but when it was their turn, when the ticket came up, they had access to so many more resources than they had ever had before. They had access to dedicated staff, the latest in equipment and technology, all the supplies being set up in the room the way that you've asked for them to be set up. So, it really created a much better opportunity, but it was difficult to kind of convince educators, the clinical educators and faculty, to move through this process and really take it seriously so that we could lock people into the requests and requirements that they had. So, again, I go back to it real quick, that after that first scheduling cohort, if you missed the deadline for that group, well, everything was going to be negotiated and figured out first, and then you would have the opportunity to supply your program requests. Now, if the room was booked and you couldn't get Tuesdays from 10 to 12 in the SimLab room A, tough. The deans were very much behind us in terms of requiring their faculty from the individual institutions to provide that information. So it really enabled us very quickly to get folks to take it very seriously, and that helped a great deal. Now, I know that the Google Calendar is not perfect. I know that it doesn't really let you show all the different ways of kind of viewing how the perspective of the room should be utilized. I don't think you can get a display where you just do it by room. You can search by room, but it'll come up. But if you're looking for an immediate and affordable solution that offers a lot of variability to your program, definitely something worth investigating because it's as simple as setting up a Gmail account or a Google account and launching those programs and those platforms. So even if you're looking for something maybe smaller for small scheduled items for your staff, or the entire team can kind of see what's going on internally. And nothing helps more than, again, going back to those staff meetings, being able to sit and like look at the whiteboard and bring down the projector slide, bring up the Google Calendar. Everyone as a team sitting here in this conference room, and we're all exploring the calendar about what's happening in the next week, about what we need to do. And that was especially helpful when we knew that, okay, certain staff are going to be leaving in a week and a half from now. All right, well, so let's start talking about now, because we can see it on the calendar when folks were going to be out of the office in terms of the staff. Okay, well, so-and-so is going to be out of the office, so what are the needs and the things that we all as a team are going to need to consider and think about doing ahead of time before we get into this space where that person is no longer there, and all of a sudden we've got all these classes and courses that are coming through that we need to help organize. So it really provides a great way of creating dialogue, and sometimes there's difficult conversations that need to be had, but again, that love of simulation that I have was one of the factors that helped me get the job in the first place. And I don't feel like any of us administrators would be here if we didn't really appreciate the power of simulation and in some way love what the potential and the power of it is. And so all of these difficult issues that we face, yes, they are a challenging story, but at the end of the day, we do appreciate that there's something to be said about the learning power and potential behind simulation. So I feel like that becomes our driving force, and it's the why we're there really. But the how is really what we're going to be focusing on again at HealthySimAdmin and other resources like HealthySimulation.com, trying to provide those additional additional resources and content. And it's already working with the technician community over at the Gathering of Healthcare Simulation Technology Specialists, or again, which is http://www.simghosts.org. We created a specific meeting just for simulation technicians, and last year in 2011 we had 86 SimTechs join us from around the United States and Canada to engage with the community specific to their own, where folks, even if they were physicians or nurses and were also in charge of running and operating the labs, or those folks that came from maybe an IT background or a paramedic background and were primarily responsible for that day-to-day operation of those simulation programs. They came together, they engaged in 2 days of training, and this year we doubled in size to 156 folks, and from around the world. We had folks coming from Singapore, from Moscow, from Australia. Some folks took an 18-hour flight to be with us there in Las Vegas and engage with this community because it really provides a lot of unique benefit when you're in a room and you can look around and you can know every single person in this room is facing the same challenges and difficulties that I am. And so whether you can participate in that, I urge you to kind of really consider the benefits of joining this type of community that wants to specifically dedicate it and to the community of administrators for that opportunity is, I think, definitely something worth exploring here on HealthySimAdmin.com. That being said, I'd love to share with you a recent video that was published. Here, that YouTube video, which is a new video that just came out, which is some of the testimonials and responses to the last gathering of healthcare simulation technology specialists, which took place August 3rd, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th at the Clinical Simulation Center of Las Vegas. It really, I think, demonstrates the power of supporting a community that's already there, but just needed kind of a roof over the house so that people could come together and see and experience those needs together. And one of the things I'd like to share is that I understand from time to time it can be difficult to ask these questions because that you're still exploring and you haven't quite figured out all of the gained all the answers yet with regards to administrating a medical simulation program or managing one or being a clinical educator or SimTech, whoever you are right now with regards to your program. Well, I'd say that no one out there has all the answers. I mean, this is a new methodology, a new technology. Everyone is learning all at the same time. So I made so many mistakes. I mean, endless number of mistakes while learning to be a technician, while learning to be an administrator, while running these programs, while developing external-based business contracts, or even when I started the website for HealthySimulation.com, and I feel like that love and that passion for understanding the power of this helps us to get through, that that difficulty with the mistakes that are going to be made, because I've always taken, when I was running the Simulation Center of Las Vegas, I always took a 5-year perspective. Is the issue and the problem or the challenge that someone is bringing to the door today or to the team meeting, is it something that's going to be an issue or a challenge in 5 years? And you really have to think about that. Is this issue or this challenge going to be something that we are going to be facing in 5 years? Or before that time, is there a solution that's possible to find to address this information? And 9 times out of 10, I'd say 99 times out of 100 actually, there's a solution that will make itself available before you get to that 5-year mark. And so that kind of ability to kind of think through, okay, well, let's stop, this is a disaster, but let's answer the call, put out the fire that we're dealing with here, and find a way of creating a preventative plan so that this does not happen again. And really, that's how you get ahead of that wave, is that the more you're able to get through all the difficulties that you're facing on an ongoing basis to the point where you start to move ahead of them, and you've actually gotten enough leeway ahead of the program so you can ride the wave of the program. Yes, there's going to continue to be challenges. Again, nobody knows all the answers to this program. So is running a simulation lab in year 3 going to be different from year 1? Absolutely. Completely different set of goals, expanded use, the need to consider technology refresh cycles, and aging technology is going to start to begin. How do you deal with replacing certain components? How do you bring in more external users now that you have a more successful internal program? So as you continue to go through, year 4 is going to be different than year 3. Year 5 is going to be different than year 4. It's going to be something that continues to evolve. And so, again, hiring and finding those folks that understand that this is going to be an evolving process, and that you're not going to ever find and have all the answers. This is a continual learning opportunity. That all the resources that you have available to you, any new resource that comes in the door, I would highly recommend you exploring, you look into. When I got started in simulation, I went to every single conference, I went to every single meeting that I could possibly find across the United States. I went to different simulation programs across the United States and around the world, so that I could directly experience how they were running and operating medical simulation in a way that I had not yet experienced. And so what I did was I gave myself this amazing tool set, because I had all these experiences from all these different conferences and simulation programs and centers coming together. And then, of course, when I started the websites, content started flowing to me so that I could start to see and share that information with everybody. That's the best way to learn, is by knowing and experiencing that this is an evolving process, that the community itself holds all of the answers to the challenges that we're each facing. And so all we have to do is connect those dots and get your previous experiences as a lead educator, or as a simulation technician, or as an administrator. Your previous experiences before you came into simulation guarantee that you have the best knowledge and aspect on how to run one particular aspect of simulation. It's guaranteed. You know the best way to do one particular aspect or many particular aspects of simulation. And so while you might have strengths over here, someone else might have strengths in a different portion of the necessary responsibilities to make simulation work. And I really am interested in trying to help create this community where folks can start to share and learn from one another, so that in an ongoing fashion, so that we can cut down on the time and the difficulty and the stress like I experienced from 2009 to 2010. Definitely one of the most difficult years of my life, and I'm sure that some of you have gone through some very difficult days or very difficult years with getting engaged with simulation and pushing it forward to the next level. And so, how can we start to share enough information where we can all move ahead of that wave and stay there in such a way that we can all have a great ride together? So definitely, again, check out that YouTube video. It's a great display of the just how thrilled folks are with the gathering of healthcare simulation technology specialists in that dedicated community. Does anyone else have another question with regards to any aspect of medical simulation for me now? Any last questions? Okay, doesn't seem like it at this point. So we've just hit the 50-minute mark. I'm going to go ahead and turn off our live streaming so we can save this session. This session, as well as the last session, and all sessions are going to be made available through both HealthySimulation.com, and will probably be made available through this player on HealthySimAdmin. We need to just get the different code for the website so that we can bring up that additional content here, so that you know, if you are unable to make any of the new upcoming simulation webinars, some of them will be saved, but we definitely encourage you to not only come to the events and ask your questions, but also share it with your fellow simulation champions so they have an opportunity to engage with a consultant such as myself and start to learn more about the communities that we're supporting and developing, as well as those additional resources. So thank you everyone for attending. I'm going to turn off this one, and then I'm going to actually bring it right back up, and I'll engage and be available if anyone has questions as we move forward. But thanks for joining us here on September 12th, and we look forward to being able to help your program succeed in the future. So thanks everyone. We'll see you again soon.